Welcome back. Tinder India has swiped right on the idea of consent. A new campaign titled Closure started an important conversation online around the idea of consent. The campaign puts the focus on talking about consent, asking for it, and highlights how a lack of a no shouldn't necessarily be mistaken as a yes, and also a yes in one situation is not necessarily a yes in every situation. Take a look. All right, joining us for this important conversation around consent, we have Taru Kapoor, GM, Tinder Match Group India, Kevin Lee, Editor-in-Chief, Yuva, worked very closely on this campaign. We also have two Tinder users, Joshua Benjamin and Ashish Srivastav, for reactions on how the communities actually received this campaign. But Taru Kapoor, to you first. Congratulations on what I think is a fantastic conversation, and you've clearly started an important conversation. What made you go ahead and do it, and why is this more important now perhaps than ever before?
Thanks, Rishika. I think this is a conversation that there is no good time to begin, and it's a beginning for us. It's a very, very important conversation, as you said. And for us at Tinder, it's a foundational value. From the day, the very first beta product of Tinder was released 9 years ago, it was based on this very fundamental idea that your interest and your desire and your acceptance is just as important as mine, which means that two people have to express interest in each other by swiping right before they can talk. And they have the option to withdraw that consent at any point of time, which is so no unsolicited messages, no harassment. And it's, all women in India, including me who've grown up here, we are very familiar with this concept of unsolicited attention, online, yes, offline. And unfortunately, in this country, particularly, like popular culture blurs these ideas of lines of consent. We don't actually talk about it as a society. Youngsters don't have a very good understanding of how to navigate situations and what it means. And so, we constantly talk to our users, our members, and then we heard that consent was a topic which Gen Z in particular feels extremely strongly about, and it's not something that we, talk about enough. So we said, let's start conversations.
Kevin, if I can bring you in here, you've worked very closely with Tinder on this campaign. Explain to us why this conversation is so important now, given the sort of rise or proliferation of dating apps in this post-pandemic era, and also how there's this very beautiful message in the film that actually says that a lack of a no doesn't necessarily mean a yes, and the onus lies on both men and women. Like you have to ask and you have to explicitly say a yes or a no.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks, Rishika. I think the conversation is extremely important in the post-pandemic era, primarily because people sometimes misassociate consent only with physical acts of intimacy. Whereas it is something that could easily apply to virtual acts of intimacy as well. A lot of people, especially students, have gone back to their homes. They're not in the cities where they're studying. They're interacting with new people and they're meeting these people through dating apps. It becomes very important to establish early on that consent is a thing, because consent really lays the foundation of what a good relationship is going to be, because the concept of boundaries, it's the concept of taking your body seriously, right? So I think that's the reason that it's really important to have this conversation now. But another point to what you added about a lack of a yes definitely meaning a no, I think the dangerous thing is that everybody is expected to understand consent and nobody wants to admit that they might not understand it. So the challenge of the campaign was explaining it even to people who think that they understand consent, bringing out these smaller nuances that they might not know, because you don't want to risk hurting somebody just because you didn't know enough about consent. So that's what the campaign is really focused on.
Ashi, as a woman and as somebody who's on Tinder, what did this film say to you? Because, when I looked at this film, I think one of the key messages was that the onus also lies in a certain sense on the woman to be able to say a firm yes or a no. And silence really, can of course be misconstrued either way. What did you think of that?
So, even like in general in our society, consent is something that is not usually talked about enough. After the movie, I think we all understood how important it is to talk about consent, because again, like you say, a lot of times it is expected that the woman, if she doesn't say a yes, if she doesn't say a no, it means that, she's okay with it, and you can go ahead with it. But again, like, unless and until you properly ask for it and you get a yes in return, and you know that it is okay to do so, that is only when you should go ahead with it.
Right.
And that is what the movie has portrayed beautifully.
Joshua, I want to come to you in the end, because you said something very interesting when we spoke earlier, that this film was an eye-opener.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely it was. Because if you think about it this way, before this entire film came out, right, it was mostly because like people don't want to actually talk about it much, all right? It's something that people don't want to really express. And if you really talk about it, then they're like, "Arey, just let it be. Let's just talk about something else. Let's just change the topic, etc., etc." But since this film came out, it was actually a very big eye opener, because now people are like, "No, you know what? Let's talk about it."
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's an uncomfortable conversation that many people have begun to have online, courtesy this new campaign. It's a story we'll continue to track very closely. Thank you all very much for joining us on the social network. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Short break, news and updates continue.